Thanks for coming this morning to a bit of an unusual and special session. At its heart, it's a bit of a reunion. This actually is the fourth in a series of discussions about the elephant in the room. Only this particular session has a bit of a twist. I asked each of our previous presidents if they would time travel, peer over the horizon, and report back on the 800-pound gorilla that they saw headed our way. Knowing what they saw there, I think can serve as a North Star as ATHE adjusts its sights, as it imagines itself, and the changing field of theater and higher education over the next several years. So this is, in essence, a living archive. Following a brief introduction, each of the participating presidents will make a brief presentation and will go in reverse chronology from the most recent past president to the founding president. I'll just give a very brief introduction, though I could go on and on, but for the sake of time, I'll just give you where they currently are in their careers. Suzanne Burgon, who served as president in 2007, is the curator's teaching professor of theater at the University of Missouri. Karen Berman served 2004 to 07, is theater chair and artistic advisor of theater programs and associate professor of theater at Georgia College and State University. Kirk Daw is the dean of the College of Creative Arts at San Francisco State. Donna Aronson is vice president for academic affairs at St. Mary's University of Minnesota. Jill Dolan is a professor of Princeton University's Department of English and the program in theater and dance of the Lewis Center for the Arts. Mark Heckler is the 18th president of Valparaiso University in Indiana, and he previously served as provost and vice chair for the University of Colorado. Carol Brandt is professor of theater, dean, and Alder H. Meadows Chair Emerita of the Meadows School of the Arts at SMU in Dallas. And Beverly Byers-Pevitts is the founding president of ATHE and president emerita of Park University. So those are the participating presidents. Let's give them a round of applause. Those who are not able to join us this morning are Gil Lazier, who served as president in 1991 to 93, Jim Simons, who served as president 1989 to 91, Harold Nichols, 1988, and you'll remember Marvin Sims, who was chair, I believe, of the theater department at Virginia Commonwealth University, who we lost in 2003. Our country is in a crisis, and the colleges and universities that the country is turning to tackle its challenges as it faces its own crisis, our colleges and universities are facing crises of their own. There's considerable doubt about whether they can be part of the answer to so many complex and interwoven problems. For lack of a better phrase, we might consider the crisis to be a crisis of confidence. Especially since the economic meltdown in 2008, the landscape of theater and higher education has been changing rapidly and disruptively. In 2011, it's metaphorically crossed the fault lines, creating dramatic change. So this morning's session is yet another reminder of the potentially tectonic changes to come, and a call to action. With that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce Suzanne Burgon.
Okay, I think this is working. Yes, okay. I certainly don't have answers to all of the things we're facing in the future, but I do have some questions and a few observations of things I've been seeing going on around me. So one of the questions, as always, is why is it that the value of theater techniques to education in other fields is not recognized, even poo-pooed? That is a question that I think we need to address and do something about. We do seem to be making some progress. At least there's some recognition of the term applied theater, a new term for some old practices. And there are some new discoveries and new variants. Last summer I wasn't at ATHE because I was attending Harvard Project Zero's Institute on the Future of Learning. And there I heard the neuroscientists talk about their new discovery that for real learning to take place, the emotions have to be involved. Now, you know, if that new discovery is worked with, then gee, there ought to be a real paradigm shift in education and that we could fit into. While I was there, I met a woman named Ellen Winter, whom some of you may have heard of, and she had just conducted some studies of how acting training can enhance empathy in students. Another new piece of information for us. But it's nice to see it's about to be published. And considering how much moaning is going on about, like in the Chronicle, about how students these days don't have empathy, perhaps we can ride along that journey as well. And by the way, this article is coming out in the Journal of Cognition and Development, but if you would like a pre-publication copy, you might want to write this down. Thalia Goldstein, who is the co-author of the article, will send it to you if you email her, and her email is Thalia, Thalia, Raquel, Raquel, @gmail.com. Thalia, Raquel, @gmail.com, or you can email me and I'll pass it along. Another variant, this summer I attended a workshop at Stony Brook University on communicating science, new Institute for Communicating Science, and a key component is the use of Spolin-based improvisation, an approach that was suggested by Alan Alda. Go out and check out their website. Wouldn't it be nice if scientists started taking theater seriously? Think about that. And then this year I had a faculty development leave to develop a new course in creativity for the non-arts major. In preparation, I read a lot of stuff, including people, innovations experts, crying for the US to become the innovation capital of the world to maintain our economic base and saying, education has failed us. Where are all the creative people? Think about that one too. Personally, I think I've been nurturing creativity in students for my entire career, so I don't think teaching creativity for the non-arts major is going to be that much of a stretch. But if you haven't heard Sir Ken Robinson on TED Talks, I strongly encourage you to go out and hear him talk his 2006 speech on how the schools kill creativity. Beyond the issues of how we might, and we must, build alliances with other disciplines, there are larger questions to consider. For one thing, there's the appalling political scene, including attempts being made to privatize US education. That would cause us lots of problems, even worse than the ones we've got now, including where goes our democracy. But widening the lens of inquiry even further, there's the question of whether civilization is in the throes of major transformation. I remember when I was undergraduate, going to hear humanistic psychologist Rollo May. You may know his book, The Courage to Create. And he came and his message was, we need a new mythology. We need a new mythology. So whether we call it a mythology, or a meta-narrative, or a core metaphor, I think we've got to replace that Newtonian clockwork universe concept, clockwork, mechanical. That dehumanizing machine model fits so well with the industrial society, social Darwinism, the selfish gene, Wall Street greed. and corporate denial of climate change. It's all part of that same metaphor. It all fits together, and the metaphor has to go and be replaced with something that is more inspiring and more fitting with current developments in science, because that's not where science is anymore. So if you're interested, there's a lot of people writing these days about trying to look at what is happening in complexity theory, chaos theory, all sorts of new scientific developments, and weave together a vision, a concept that will create a metaphor that can justify and serve a collaborative, compassionate society in which human beings can reach out and empathize and collaborate with each other and create relationships, healthy relationships, not only with other humans, but with other beings on our planet and with our planet itself. As theater artists, we are the storytellers and the myth makers. Can we contribute hope, passion, and art to the search for sustainable models of human relationships, of relationships with the universe around us? My question is, why not?
My topic is on rules of engagement, engaged learning, and engaged faculty. The rules of engagement are changing, with the economic crisis stifling new hires and finances committed to the essential disciplines which serve the core curriculum in both K through 12 and the academy. How will theater faculty maintain their place in higher education? The no child left behind, teach to the test mentality has led the country into dropping the arts from the curriculum. Of course, this mentality has also led to the test cheating scandals that have led to firings in the Atlanta school system. 30% of New York schools have no certified arts teachers, up from 20% recently. Mayor Bloomberg's proposed budget estimates 350 arts specialists will be eliminated. LA has threatened within the next 2 years to eliminate all arts teachers. With less students educated in the arts of K through 12, less students will pursue theater in higher education. When these students do arrive on university campuses, they will find themselves in bastions in which building construction is dedicated to wellness centers and science buildings. The essential disciplines, end quote, are using their new limited faculty lines to cover the core. The University System of Georgia has simply suffered a 30% budget cut in the last 3 years, and this is happening across academia. The challenges faced by gender discrimination in administration further exacerbate the climate for theater and all disciplines. A recent study by the American Council on Education found that 23% of college presidents and 35% of academic deans were female. These figures included community colleges and women's colleges, where the expectations would be the percentages in other colleges would be even lower. Additionally, the rules of engagement for holding on to faculty with their current tenure and promotion policies in place make engagement even more tenuous. Terms like collegiality and fit in our tenure and promotion system allow men to hold women down to lower ranks. Anecdotal evidence supports the notion that women still have a more difficult time gaining respect as chairs from men in their faculty. Likewise, the field of theater is discriminated against by other fields. I propose that we must, as my current research shows, find new ways for theater faculty to engage in the larger picture of the university, and also new ways to promote our value to both university administrators and theater parents and students. Theater must infuse itself into the life of the university through collaborations across disciplines in which we prove invaluable to the history department because of joint historical narrative storytelling ventures, through infusion of theater in science and math, through STEM, through English and creative writing collaborations by producing plays developed there, with modern languages producing international plays, and with health sciences doing mental health productions. The rules of engagement suggests that theater must use our engaged learning and high-impact learning techniques to make ourselves indispensable to university life as a whole. Further, we must earn the university president's support and endorsement by entertaining donors. My recent mixed methodology research into creativity and cognition suggests that we hold an important place in teaching creativity, as you just said, across disciplines. Moreover, we must find innovative techniques for faculty evaluation to work in favor of our discipline. In order to promote women overall and theater in particular, we cannot let our discipline's creative scholarship be evaluated willy-nilly by T&P committees who do not understand the field. We must turn to quantitative ways in which theater can control the data in our tenure and promotion packets as they move through the process. Following Dr. Raul Ariola's tenets, we must find a way to evaluate faculty using a quantitative methodology which will ensure fairness to the system. And Raul's book, Developing a Comprehensive Faculty Evaluation System, argues there is a new paradigm with an increasing use of part-time adjunct and non-tenure track faculty and challenges to the concept of tenure itself. Under this new paradigm, evidence of the quality of faculty performance has become a key expression of this demand for accountability, with the expectation that faculty can both be amazing teachers and knowledgeable scholars. He uses weighted criteria in service learning and scholarship and a numbering system to show that faculty member X has earned a top number in scholarship, teaching, and service, which by a standardized, agreed-upon cutoff number makes faculty member X eligible for tenure. No more questions about whether a publication in a theater journal counts less than a science journal, or whether a production in regional theater counts at all. The discipline of theater must transform as the rules of engagement in higher education evolve.
My colleagues have already spoken, I think more eloquently than I can, to the fact that we're living through paradigm change. In fact, the paradigm has already changed. What we're living through is our getting used to it. So I want to say a few much more informal and I think subjective things. And they come in the form of what I think of the good news and the bad news. The good news is that in the 25 years ATHE has been in existence, we have seen, even though we've seen a lot of economic damage, the part that's good from our perspective is the economy has clearly shifted out of the industrial economy, even out of the knowledge economy, and we absolutely now live in a creative economy. However devastated the economy is, the creative sector has remained healthy and is the only growth sector at the moment. That has very important implications for our field. The bad news is, from my perspective, over the 10 years I've been a dean, I've watched the creative disciplines take off with, that's not the bad news. I have watched over 10 years a huge new demand for students, from students, for creative disciplines. In particular, design has become the hot new field. Schools of design are sprouting up everywhere where they didn't used to exist. The demand for digital media is enormous at the moment. Cinema departments attract more students than they can possibly hold. What I think of as the bad news in that is, in the last decade, we have not seen the same kinds of growth in demand for students for the theater discipline. And I think we have to ask ourselves why students don't see us as a creative gateway in the way that they see some of these other disciplines. I'm not sure that I know all of the answers, but I absolutely know that theater is a great place to learn the whole brain skills that are necessary for a creative future. I know that we are the mother of the narrative arts, and it seems odd to watch students go to other narrative arts to try to learn the skills instead of coming to the home ship. I was really reminded of this recently when Francis Ford Coppola came to speak at my university to the cinema department. He was there because his brother was one of my predecessors as the dean of the College of Creative Arts. And he gave a very thoughtful and generous speech to the cinema majors. And what he said to them was, in your 4 years, this is what you should do with your time. In your first year, you should go over to the theater department and volunteer to act in every play that you can possibly act in. And in your second year, you should go over to the theater department and take every directing class you possibly can and direct every production that you possibly can. And in your third year, maybe you might pick up a camera and think about how to frame it once you have something to say. I think that's good advice, but I think we have to worry that our students don't see the world through that framework, and why we have not been as successful at communicating our discipline as one of the great sources of a creative future. I think there are some questions about whether or not our institutions are going to continue to exist in their same form. And that raises a whole other line of thinking. But just in our small world of the arts and the creative disciplines, I think we deserve a larger place, and we have to think about how to maneuver ourselves into it.
Good morning. This morning, I'm going to speak about something that I spoke about at the turn of the century when I was the president. And that's something that I continue to speak about everywhere I go, everybody I meet. And I'm speaking again about diversity. I'm speaking about how the demographics are going to affect us and why aren't we listening. In his confirmation hearing in 2009, the United States Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, called education the civil rights issue of our generation, the only sure path out of poverty and the only way to achieve a more equal and just society. So what is happening? Shifts in the racial and ethnic composition of student populations. Minority students will account for practically all of the growth among high school graduates over the next decade, with Hispanic graduates alone more than offsetting the decrease in white non-Hispanic graduates. These and related trends raise in you the question of how educators meet the educational needs of all students, with attention to continuing, pervasive K-12 achievement gaps, and how they should rethink their recruitment, outreach, financial aid, curricular, and other policy parameters as they seek to educate a 21st century workforce and citizenry. For example, Texas was declared a majority-minority state in 2005 when non-Hispanic whites fell below half of the total population. Because minority groups are younger on average than whites, the majority-minority threshold occurred earlier for the college-age population. In 1990, data indicated that just over half of the college-age population was non-Hispanic whites, but by 2000, only 44% were so classified. If the growth trends continue, the Hispanic college-age population will surpass non-Hispanic whites at college age in this decade, and blacks and Hispanics will comprise over half of Texas's total workforce by 2020. That both groups, but especially Hispanics, remain highly underrepresented in the state's higher education institutions bodes ill for the state's future economic prospects. I bring up Texas because I spent 19 years in Texas, and I feel intimately involved in what was happening there. I am now in Minnesota, the direct opposite. In a reset for education, Joni Finney states, Southern and Southwestern states are experiencing explosive growth. 9 states will account for 70% of the country's population growth by 2025. 32 states face declines in their young populations, leaving them vulnerable economically at a time when many well-educated baby boomers will retire. Educating working adults and young adults many of whom are underserved by the current educational system, requires rethinking programs and services. That's from the Reset for Education, which was in the Chronicle Almanac. Those of us in the private sector can see in our recruitment of entering classes the diminishing numbers of students graduating from high schools in the Midwest and the Northeast. While white student numbers diminish, students of color and underrepresented minorities are increasing. What does this mean for theater programs? Where are we recruiting students? What are we doing to serve first-generation students? How are we assisting in their gaining the cultural capital to survive and thrive in higher education? How are we teaching these students? What are we doing pedagogically? Who will these students look to as models? Who are our faculty and administrators? What are we doing to retain and develop faculty of color? African American and Latinos made substantial gains in advanced degree attainment. However, they still represent a very small fraction of the students who earn master's, doctoral, and first professional degrees. Among institutions that have made significant efforts at increasing student diversity, achieving faculty diversity requires attention. Hiring of underrepresented faculty has increased, but the turnover of faculty positions has also increased. 3 out of every 5 minority hires has replaced a minority faculty. We must interrupt this usual practice. Because faculty hiring is so central to departmental autonomy, departments are important sites of attention for improving faculty diversity and making the connection to excellence. Diversity is essential, not optional. If diversity is an institutional, or for ATHE, a disciplinary strategic initiative or goal, then enrolling diverse students and hiring diverse faculty could be connected to program review, to strategic planning, or to the accreditation process. We must understand that diversifying the faculty is linked to a broader understanding of excellence. Diversity in the faculty represents institutional commitment to equity in both hiring and retention. Diverse faculty serve as role models of possibility for all. Even more, the absence of diversity sends strong signals about the lack of possibilities and the degree to which talent from diverse groups is appreciated. 3 quotes. Minority faculty and white female faculty play an important role in bringing diversity themes to scholarship, increasing diversity in the curriculum, introducing more and different patterns of pedagogy, and increasing engagement of students in the campus community. Diversity increases the attractiveness of the institution for persons from diverse backgrounds, as well as others who value diversity as a place to work and to develop. Diversity around the table, within and across disciplines, as well as in the institution as a whole, strengthens the democracy of decision-making, increasing trust in the process and the perspectives introduced. Diversity has implications for the leadership paradigm. Since most academic administrators come from the faculty ranks, a relatively homogeneous faculty clearly limits the future development of diversity in leadership. Diversity increases an institution's capacity for making connections and developing vital relationships with diverse communities outside the campus. Both for personal and intellectual reasons, research has documented that many white women and faculty of color are more likely to cross institutional borders to make these connections. What about our curriculum? Have theater programs expanded their curriculum to be inclusive of gender, race, and global issues? Has the production program reflected these changes? Are we expanding the pool of underrepresented minorities in our graduate programs, particularly the doctoral programs? Are we hiring faculty role models for our students, opening the possibility to change how we do things? Are we demonstrating how gender, racial, and cultural diversity strengthen a university and a society? Let us adapt to the changing conditions of theater in higher education and to higher education in general. Let us do things differently.
Thanks.
Good morning. I just want to say I'm delighted to be up here with all of my wonderfully articulate and passionate colleagues. And like Donna, my remarks also reflect on the issues that were very much a part of my ATHE presidency, which unfortunately I don't think have really changed much, and that's advocacy and activism. It still seems to me that the arts, well, probably to all of you, are very much under attack in this country and on our campuses. The economic woes that everyone has outlined here this morning and that we're all desperately aware of aren't going to make this better. We're all looking at cuts across the board, and the main question of what's considered vital in our institutions, not to mention in our country. It seems that we have to keep making arguments that the arts indeed are part of what's vital, because it's not necessarily obvious to the people who make these decisions. I was lucky enough to spend the summer teaching in Ireland and heard Michael D. Higgins, who was the Minister of Culture there for many years and is now running for president of the country, who was incredibly articulate about the importance of arts in a democracy. And one thing he said very eloquently was that people in a democracy deserve to have a creative life. I don't think I've ever heard a politician say that. It was incredibly heartening and refreshing. He said everyone deserves to have a creative life. It was really the most inclusive, wide-ranging sense of arts policy I've ever heard. So my question is, how can we promote that here? How can we think about not only arts as an entitlement, but creativity as part of a necessary life for a democracy? It seems to me that we have to think about this on the level of how we train our students, so that we're very good at training them in the practice of our field, but still not as good as I think we could be at training them in its critical and cultural aspect. I think we need a lot more, not less, arts discourse in this country. The paucity of arts discourse, the impoverishment of our critical discourse is really going to keep us down at such a crucial time. The criticism that's thumbs up, thumbs down, we all know this. This is ludicrous in terms of how we think about the importance of arts in this country. So we need to elevate the level of that discourse by training our students to be articulate and astute cultural commentators who have persuasive arguments about the import and impact of theater and performance on our culture. We have to train them to be spokespeople for what they do. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to do it that much longer. There's a host of recent reports about the diminishing number of jobs for arts journalists. And as I've been thinking about that, I actually think that might be a good thing. I'm not arguing for more arts journalists. I think the hegemony of critics and conventionally oriented newspapers hasn't necessarily done us any good. But what I do think is that the democracy of the internet is proliferating lots of other outlets for conversations about the arts. I participate in that with my blog, The Feminist Spectator. I read lots of other blogs, and these are certainly micro conversations. But I think if they proliferate, there is a chance that we can have an effect at that level. There's a lot of really interesting work by lots of different organizations. I read Howl Round, which is sponsored by, I think, the Playwright Center in Minneapolis, does wonderful work thinking about the arts and what it means. So these avenues and venues are out there for thinking, but I think we have to hook our students into them. We have to teach actors and directors and designers to write about what they do. We have to encourage them and our faculty to write letters to the editor, to write op-ed pieces about our work, because we can no longer afford to have other people speaking for us. We have to speak for ourselves. We have to speak out. We have to take agency, rather than either waiting for the axe to fall, because it will, or waiting for someone else to write about us, whether it's a critic or an administrator or something else. I want to advocate a critics corps, or, critic, that word has a bad resonance, so I don't know, we have to get a commentator corps, but an increasing community of writers and artists and advocates, and all three of those identities together, who will really make visible and necessary the work that we do, so that we'll be able to continue doing it. Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be here and to listen to all of these wonderful ideas and reflections on the future. And Jill, your comments on agency and that need for us to just seize that opportunity is just a wonderful thing to think about, even as we grapple with some pretty tough questions. Before I launch into these remarks, I want to give you a little bit of context. Every year, the American Council on Education has a national meeting, and ACE represents all of the sectors of higher education, public and private, community colleges, four-year, and research universities. And one day out of that conference, they invite all the presidents into the room, and they close the doors. And then they put something very provocative in front of the presidents to worry about. And this past year was a doozy. So with that, I'll launch in. Harvard business professor Clayton Christensen has coined the term disruptive innovation to describe the tendency for organizations to strive toward making things that are, quote, too good, too expensive, and too inconvenient for people. Organizations continue to innovate, yet they do so by sustaining and perfecting offerings over time. Christensen defines his concept in this way. He says, disruptive innovation is the process by which a sector that has previously served only a limited few because of its products and services, were complicated, expensive, and inaccessible, is transformed into one whose products and services are simple, affordable, and convenient, and serves many, no matter what their wealth or expertise. The new innovation does so by redefining quality in a simple and often disparaged application at first, and then gradually improves such that it takes more and more market share over time as it becomes able to tackle more complicated problems. Christensen is well known for applying disruptive innovation theories to his analysis of transformational change in a variety of sectors, including technology and healthcare. And among his widely read works are The Innovator's Dilemma, 1997, The Innovator's Solution, 2003, and Seeing What's Next, 2004. Some of you may have read Disrupting Class in 2008, which looks at the root causes of why schools, K-12, struggle and offers some solutions. While his latest work, The Innovator's Prescription, examines how to fix America's healthcare system. Well, now Christensen has turned his thinking about disruptive innovation to higher education. In his latest study, Disrupting College, How Disruptive Innovation Can Deliver Quality and Affordability to Post-Secondary Education, issued in spring 2011, Christensen argues that American higher education is ripe for transformation. Policymakers would normally turn to colleges and universities to tackle some of these pressing challenges, particularly in increasing access to low-income and underserved students. Yet, it appears to Christensen that our colleges are part of the problem. He states, quote, the institutions are now increasingly beset by financial difficulties, and the recent financial meltdown is but a shadow of what is to come. The further looming state budget crisis spelled difficult times for many colleges and universities, and there's growing acknowledgement that many American universities' prestige came not from being the best at educating, but from being the best at research, and from being selective and accepting the best and the brightest. And unfortunately, most institutions in America have mimicked this model. Christensen indicates that policymakers are turning their attention to this subtle but profoundly important change in strategy, quote, shifting the focus of higher education policy away from how to enable students to afford higher education to how we can make a quality post-secondary education affordable. Christensen concludes that disruptive innovation is imminent for higher education because the policy environment is ripe for change, and two key conditions now exist. First, a technology enabling, which he describes as online learning. And second, a business model innovation that increases convenience and lowers cost. Both conditions now exist for public and private institutions. And he argues that new college and university constructs will emerge that are going to separate the three conflated functions that exist in today's model. The function of knowledge creation, the function of knowledge proliferation and learning, and the function of preparation for life and careers. Universities, he argues, should separate the functions of its research enterprise from the value-added process of learning, and also develop a new model for social development and career and life preparation that does not require residential living alongside learning. This requires us, he says, to abandon the assumption that prestige is the sole domain of institutions that accept the best students and do the best research, and to consider new models of excellence. This also allows for an escape from the policies that focus on things like credit hours and seat time to one that ties academic progression to competency and mastery. Now, why did I spend all of my allotted time introducing Christensen's concepts to a group of theater practitioners, theorists, and teachers? Because, friends, there's a unique opportunity in all of this, what appears to be doom and gloom for those of us, at least at my stage of career. There's a unique opportunity for ATHE to engage its members in vitally important conversations about the future of higher education during what is going to be a prolonged period of innovation. Theater people thrive in innovation. We're creative and seize assets and opportunities and take advantage of them. We're good at appropriating ideas and using them in many ways. Now, we can either both wring our hands and worry about the future and potential of our programs to wither and die in this new paradigm, much in the way that my professors built fortifications around the theater discipline to protect it from the ravaging forces of television and film. And taught me, as a young scholar, to protect the live theater at all costs. Now, we could do that, or we could throw open the doors, and we can invite all those who embrace these innovations together and conceive of new ways of teaching and learning and performing that can enhance rather than diminish the possibilities for profound contributions that the live theater can make in an increasingly mediated society comprised of increasingly isolated and socially inexperienced individuals. We're at a crossroads at this silver anniversary of ATHE. We have opportunities to open the association to emerging creative forms, to forge alliances, to facilitate networks of faculty, to showcase best practices, and to foster innovation. We can position our theater programs at ATHE for responding successfully to disruptive innovation, or perhaps even seize the opportunity to invent it ourselves. Thank you.
Good morning. I think that I am hearing a major theme about different topics coming from this august group. I would like to talk about something that's pretty fundamental and pretty emotional and pretty in our faces. Over the last 4 decades, the proportion of university faculty who are tenured or on the tenure track plummeted from 57% in 1975 to 31% in 2007, and in 2010 it was reported to have fallen to 25%. My what's next challenge today is that faculty must not just fight the fight to retain tenure. Rather, we, the professionals, not politicians, not bureaucrats, must seek the light and find solutions, because we are the grown-ups and the real deals. To do so, we must know what to protect and what to protect against in the context of culture and climate. That context includes current values and priorities, the return on investment mentality. Politically, current proposals exist to base student loans on earning potential in respective fields. Academically, state-of-the-art recreation and dining facilities rather than full-time continuing faculty. Obviously, the weakened economy, lower revenues, and escalating costs. The 1994 elimination of mandatory retirement age needed generational protections, knowing when and being able to afford to get off the stage for older faculty. Young faculty having an opportunity to get onto the stage, finding the balance between institutional stability and fluidity. The climate of accountability and scapegoatism that pervades our world today, and global rage, the haves versus the have-nots. We must protect against loss of academic due process, loss of academic freedom, loss of academic community with the fragmentation of faculty. All kinds of categories of classifications of faculty, what they can and can't do and what their responsibilities are. The outsourcing, what I call the outsourcing of education. Demoralization and disengagement, exhaustion and anger, cynicism and bitterness, loss of courage, conviction and commitment. Those are the minefields in my mind. We must protect long-term institutional and personal investment, intellectual and artistic mission, programmatic stability, and long-term planning, faculty professional development, faculty governance and collegiality, faculty morale and passion, salaries and benefits for faculty and staff, integrity and quality of faculty teaching and scholarship, and most of all, student-centered education. I've always believed in the adage, if you're going to dance with a bear, you'd better not get tired. That bear may be on the horizon, folks, and she can be a bully and a beast. So we must be smarter and more prepared and more active, because it is we who must determine our future and that of higher education. To do that, we may have to change our angle of vision, to become Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society and stand on our own desks to see the world differently, or heed Dr. Dysart's words in Equus. The thing is, I'm wearing that horse's head myself, all reined up in old language and old assumptions, straining to jump clean-hooved onto a new track of being I only suspect is there. I can't see it because my educated average head is being held at the wrong angle. I can't jump because the bit forbids it, and my own basic force, my horsepower, if you like, is too little. Spit out the bit, friends. Grab those reins and prepare to run the bear to ground.
I'm old, so it takes me a long time to get up here. Not really, no, not really at all. Good morning. I recall standing here in front of this curtain when it was gold except for a panel that was right here that was red in August of 1986. And I had chosen a solid red dress, the same color as that panel, to wear to this meeting. So my colleagues said, they only saw my head. My face, well that's good, okay. I would like to, because this is the 25th anniversary of the Association for Theater and Higher Education, to congratulate all of you for being here, to thank you for being here, and to recognize those people who were at the National Educational Theater Conference in New York in 1986, who came to the first business meeting of ATHE, and all those people who came to this room in August of 1987 for the first ATHE conference. And as I thank all of you who were there, I'm going to ask all of you who were here in 1987 to stand up. You need a little stretch right now. Thank you, and isn't it great we're all still here? Right? Okay. That's how I feel on a daily basis, okay. What does it mean to be in a global society is just a little bit of what I want to address today. But before I do that, I neglected something. There are two other founding members of the original Board of Governors here, and I want to recognize them. And that is Peter Sargent, who was Vice President for Operations, and Lila Wolf Wilkinson, who was Secretary of the organization. Now, to the topic of what I chose as the elephant in the room. First of all, I'll reflect back to when Bill Clinton was running for office for his first 4 years of terms and reflect what everybody has really mentioned here this morning, which is the economy, stupid. And we have to continue to remember that. If your university or your college if your university or your college is going to participate in the recently announced U.S.-India Higher Education Summit to be held in Washington, D.C. this fall, raise your hand. Fabulous. At least there are 3. Did I count 3? Okay, fabulous. Do you know the details about the Obama-Singh 21st Century Knowledge Initiative that will provide funds to strengthen higher education between the two countries of India and the United States, and for which you could be among the first of institutions to solicit the committee for a grant, or maybe you could be on the grant committee selecting those recipients. How many students from your educational institution will study this year in India or in another country? How many faculty from your educational institution will participate in studies in another country this year? How many of you are leaders as you know it? because of the number of university-wide committees that you sit on, and especially those that are dealing with globalization, internationalization, and entrepreneurial leadership. What are the current 3 major curricular area focuses of your department? Are you focusing on globalization, internationalization? Are you focusing on global leadership? Are you focusing on creative entrepreneurship? And as Mark so beautifully suggested, how can you weave that interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, multidiversity across the disciplines within your institution? I am sure you know your university's position on globalization, on internationalization, and how that knowledge contributes to your students and how it is being infused within your curriculum in theater, and how you are working that, weaving that among all the other curricular areas in your institution. And I know that because you're theater. Because you are theater people. Because that means that we have always been multi-diverse and multidisciplinary. I propose 3 areas of continued in-depth examinations to you, and that is entrepreneurial engagement, entrepreneurial leadership, and globalization or internationalization. America's most innovative colleges and universities create and shape a new interconnected world by preparing global learners. It's what we're doing. You know, I'm always amazed when people tell me that I'm not in the business as a faculty member of educating a global learner. I'm in the business of teaching my students in my class. Tell me there's a difference. I don't see it, okay. The field of theater does prepare learners for serving in this ever-changing global society that we're living in. And I just want to refer to the American Council on Education Center for International Initiatives briefly, which finds that internationalization and globalization, in the most recent study they did in 2008, they did one in 2001, and one was finished and published in 2008, and another one is coming out in another couple of years. However, this finds that internationalization is not a high priority on most colleges' campuses. Yet if you have listened today to what everybody here has said, it infuses across all disciplines, all curriculums, and you know what we can do. We in theater can lead that charge on every campus in America in which we are. And if we work on that, we can make that happen as the discipline and the field of theater. You can go to the American Council on Education's website to find the latest document, Mapping Internationalization on U.S. Campuses, 2008 edition, if you want to read that. It has incredible statistics in it that you will be amazed at. I just want to mention, I think just one, there's so much there that I could talk about, but I've taken other time and I won't. But less than 40% of college and universities mention global or international education in their mission statements. And that was in a study that was completed in 2008. So that's alarming to me, because what we see all around us is how we must continue to engage in that. And I was going to quote some from that summary, but I'm not going to because of the time. So we can have time for discussion up here, which we desperately need. What does internationalization and globalization and entrepreneurial leadership in these fields do for us? It educates the next generation of leaders to be savvy, to be knowledgeable, and I would say to be much more knowledgeable than we were, than we are, and than we can even think about being tomorrow, because we must educate them to continue seeking that knowledge and that savvy around the human condition. Global entrepreneurship international education is both a moral imperative and a competitive advantage for our students, as it is for your university, within the higher education conundrum that we find ourselves at this point. Corporate, business, administrative leaders, whether a nonprofit or for-profit, constantly have expressed to me, when I served as president for 9 years, frustration about the need to reorient and basically educate new hires to think globally. And that was from whatever field within the university they came. What can you as faculty in theater do? What can faculty in theater as a discipline across the board do to infuse global and international education and entrepreneurship in your unit, in your university, and what can ATHE do? I will suggest a couple of things. Personally, actively involve yourself across the university in mission-related activities and visioning-related activities, so you know that it's infused within your institution. Because you know you may be staying there a long time. People are moving around less than what they used to. 2, in your department, provide leadership for your students and your colleagues to develop creative and emotional intelligence to investigate more deeply the purpose of leadership and the purpose of entrepreneurial leadership and the purpose of entrepreneurial globalization. And 3, as an organization, ATHE should provide emerging leaders programs for faculty who to become department chairs and deans, who then go on to become vice presidents and become presidents of institutions. And I cite, all the people up here on this panel as an example, actually. I mean, I'm looking at people who became deans, people who have refused deanships and decided to be the leader among the profession and in scholarship. But that is what is happening, and that can continue to happen. But I think we need to look at how the organization can provide emerging leaders program for faculty who creatively energize the rest of the academy in entrepreneurial globalization and leadership. And finally, lead students and faculty to be better at integrating everything they are learning. Not just to develop, but to utilize an entrepreneurial imagination in what they do and how they move among society. Students today are taught by faculty who infuse multicultural and global studies throughout the curriculum. And as colleges and universities re-examine their priorities, and they are, and they will continue to do so, as budgets will have to be cut, and continue to be cut more. And if you think 30% or 50% of your budget is being cut now has been a lot, I think it's going to be more. So because we have the capability of being innovative, we can be more innovative than all the other disciplines. And also because we have the capability of entrepreneurial leadership, we can move across the other disciplines within the academy and create those multi-diverse curricular needs that will provide for our students. By recommitting ourselves and our institutions to global connectedness and to international education, and to prepare our students to support our faculties in new discoveries and establish a curriculum, a theater curriculum that will truly benefit a global society. That is our challenge, and that is what we can do as members of ATHE. Thank you.
I just want to say, I think what I have just heard is a very brief shorthand for how to create ATHE's future and how to create the future of the field. And as Suzanne said, I hope we're listening. Let's take some questions from you now. I know you have questions for our panelists, so please, there's a center mic. Just come up. Let's move through pretty quickly. Try to keep your questions brief, and we'll see how many of your questions we can process here. Thanks, Lionel.
Hello, my name is Lionel Walsh. I teach in a country a little south of where we are now called Canada. And Beverly, you mentioned globalization, and in the interest of globalization, I'd like to just, this is not a question, bring a new book to your attention. It's by Simon Brault, who is the director of the National Theatre School of Canada French Division. And the title is quite provocative, No Culture, No Future. And we talk all the time about entrepreneurship and how we have to make our case for culture being part of the economy. But he says we also have to remember this. Societies need their artists so they have access to works that explore the human condition at its darkest and most tragic recesses, but also at its most humorous, comic, and ecstatic. I ordered the book. It went out of print in English very quickly. But her friend tried, she said it's a new Bible in the classroom. So I hope that we can look at the future with culture. Thanks. Thanks to the wonderful things you've all said, by the way. Aren't we lucky to be in this organization?
Questions? Yes. Thank you for coming out.
Thank you. I'm really nervous saying this. Can all the adjuncts in the room please stand up?
Mm-hmm. Adjuncts? Number of adjuncts?
I teach at Kent State University, where there are 850 full-time and tenure-track faculty and 860 adjunct faculty members. In my department, there are a lot of adjuncts, and I'm the only one here because I was lucky enough to be funded. And I'm willing to bet that a lot of the adjuncts who are here on their own dime, and that ATHE provided opportunities for people who are unemployed and for people who are students to attend at a lower rate, but not for people who are underemployed. And as we've heard, we are the new faculty majority. And I think I'm very grateful that you brought that up, because we feel under a great deal of pressure. We are not supported with academic freedom, we're not supported with space, we're not supported obviously with money, we're not supported with benefits, we're not supported with all these things, and people know that. But as this trend continues, departments are going to end up with faculty who can't communicate with each other and who have no esprit de corps, because we're all out doing our own thing because we have to cobble together a living. And it's an enormous problem. And departments, even though we know you can't afford to hire us full-time, we know this, we understand that, but there are other things that can be done to support us. And I want departments to think very, very seriously about that. Thanks.
Yes. Say that is a strategic conversation that ATHE has begun, and I know that the organization is really seriously looking at the adjunct issue, and will bring forth some recommendations. I know we're on it, and thank you.
Steve, it's just, I was an adjunct while I was president of ATHE. And you can imagine my trying to get the support of my university while I was president, and that was a feat. And so I sympathize with that quite a bit, and I know ATHE has continually tried to address that issue, and I know Bill is going to do that in the future. So.
Thank you. Other questions? Doug?
Hey.
Hi.
Quoting Jacques Derrida, there is no future without Marx. And the number of the sessions I went to, people are talking about the C word, we're talking about capitalism. We're talking about the structure of the way ownership, control of the culture. I'm wondering why the word capitalism isn't really articulated in this group. And to be able to help us to stand back to see not just what chaos is happening, what kind of threats are there, but why. This is something I think we all need to engage in. While we've been sometimes interrupting conversations for the last 20 years, my observation is sometimes thought to be outrageous. I don't think this is an outrageous observation. We need to, as a group, understand, not just find niches on this sort of Titanic that keeps running into icebergs, every 5 years. Not just find our niches, but to be able to get our students to think about the context in which we live. Not just finding places to hide. Thanks.
Suzanne's comments earlier speak to that issue. Suzanne, would you like to?
Yeah, Doug, I understand where you're coming from, and I could have spent a whole lot of time on one piece. To me, capitalism is a part of the whole Newtonian clockwork universe worldview that needs to change. And if we had more time to talk about all of those things, yeah, that's certainly one I would have talked about. But I did mention it at the conclusion with some perhaps hesitance, only because I don't want people to think I'm loony, just because I think we're living in a reality that isn't real.
So there's actually some evidence that public perception around this issue is changing so that no one sounds like a fringe member by expressing concern about capitalism. We know that students who come from the highest income, family income quartile, but lowest achievement quartile, graduate at higher rates than the exact opposite. In fact, we know that the only single strong predictor of college graduation is family income. And that's wrong. And the public knows that it's wrong. And they have begun to express some of their concerns in terms of a lack of confidence in higher education around that particular issue. But however much the evaporation of confidence is a problem, it's also an opportunity for those who deeply care about the opportunities for achievement for students who are denied it strictly because of their family circumstances right now.
Thank you, Kurt. Yes, sir.
I'd just like to add a brief statement to the question response
to the comments that Doug made. And that really is that what is frightening in terms of the political climate related to the economy and higher education right now is truly developing universities where we have the haves and then universities where we have the have-nots. The rich and then the rest are being lobbed into this middle class that has becoming poorer and poorer and poorer along with the poor. And what we're seeing in some of our politics, and I ask us all to be politically engaged, is that their expectation for universities is to stop, and community colleges even, but to stop educating so many people. Well, when that happens, it's only going to be the haves that are going to be educated. So that, where are you done? Oh, there you are. But I mean, I know that's part of what you're talking about, I'm assuming. And that is an activism that we also need to be involved in as a profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev.
Steve, I was just going to say, the Georgia system is socialist. And we have the Hope Scholarship, in which all students who have C+, B- averages and above get an 80% ride to college. So right now we kind of defied Kurt and so that system, but it's built on the lottery, and so I think a lot of people are going poor, spending on lottery, and that budget has been cut 20% this year, and so we don't know how much longer we can depend on that.
And isn't that called the Hope Scholarship? Yes.
Yes, that's the Hope Scholarship, and people are talking about losing hope.
Thanks for your patience.
Hi, I'm Spike Wilson, formerly U of Pittsburgh, now Ivy Tech Community College in Indiana. My question to you is, from your perspective, how does a community college that teaches theater as not as a program, but as one or two classes, enable people to become theater majors in a four-year institution later on?
Great question, thanks.
I'll speak to that. I think that 2 or 3 courses and the general education courses that student takes will prepare them. And I think that the work is in our ability to look at seamless transfers from the community colleges to the four-year institutions. And it works from both directions. The community colleges looking to the four-year institutions to create the articulation agreements that allow for that seamless transfer, and the realization that the student is going to be doing much of their general education core in the community college, and that's the conversation that happens at the four-year institution when they commit to that seamless transition. And so I think that the possibilities are there. Institutions are doing these things. Some states have mandated it. So I think that these are things that we have to address, and the theater departments should be putting it out. When I'm working on articulation agreements at the institution where I am right now, where do they start? In the School of Business. But we need to look at them from the other disciplines, and I think that's what we've got to do. That's why business is growing everywhere.
So I just offer another, which campus are you at Ivy Tech?
Kokomo.
Kokomo, okay.
Yeah.
So what would that be, Indiana State, that's closer to you? I would encourage you personally to go visit your theater colleagues in the colleges that are closest to you. Walk in with your syllabi, curriculum, sit down with the chair and say, hey, can we work on an articulation? Because Ivy Tech is still a young community college system. So many other institutions have set these kinds of articulations up, and the best thing you can do, person to person, sit down with your colleague in the other theater department, say, can we work on this? And that theater department is going to be looking for how to grow its majors. It's going to feel under some pressure to do that. You're providing a potential solution. You may get some advice about things you might want to consider in revamping your curriculum so that articulates better. The admissions people at that school won't get around to your articulation because they're not going to see the worth or value in it. But the theater chair can agitate to get it done at the other institutions. I just encourage you, I think there are several institutions around you that would be good match.
I really think that the community college atmosphere, particularly the one I'm in, is uniquely placed to be a model for relevance for the future of our profession. But there are a lot of pitfalls in that because it is so terribly monetized.
Yeah. And the takeaway would be that if you were to take the initiative, then the faculty could get together with the other faculty. They could begin to work on a plan together.
And I encourage you to invite the faculty from your closest by institution or department to your campus to meet with your students. Yes. And they should delight in that because that's called recruitment.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi, Rhonda.
Thank you all so much. This is great. I've got about 20 things that went through my head. I'm going to try to narrow it down. I've been in Texas now since 1995. Thank you, Carol, for bringing me there. But I'm from Dallas. It's been over 100 degrees for all but one of the past 40-plus days. This morning I read that Rick Perry has said that Medicare and Social Security are unconstitutional.
Oh my God.
I have been watering the foundation of my house to keep the soil from pulling away too far from Suzanne, so thank you for bringing up the global perspective and sort of thinking about this in some ways. So I'm thinking about, thank you for bringing in capitalism, Doug, because I think that's a huge part of it. And your comments have been wonderful and fruitful and fabulous, but it's not just about globalization in terms of markets and employment and culture. It's also about the planet. I went to see Reverend Billy last night, who has moved from the Church of Stop Shopping to Earthalugya. And so there's something I think about our education today, which is not just about the human, but about, ecologies of performance, literally connected to the salvation of the planet. We're talking about being responsible to our students, saving American democracy, because I think what we're talking about is profoundly at the roots of democracy. I mean, if you're not educated, you're not a citizen. And so I am, but also if you don't have water and you don't have food, Hamlet becomes stupid. So I'm not sure how we wrap our heads around that, and I've become increasingly sensitive to language. So when we're talking about, and Beverly is a mentor of mine, she is amazing, but the word entrepreneurship, I understand it, we have to use that, but it is the language of a particular capitalist framework. When we're talking about employment, educating people for jobs, and their lives, being career-centered, what kind of, and we're facing these pressures all of the time about, this, I think it was you, Kurt, who said that people or degrees, programs might be expected to justify their existence by virtue of how many of their students get placed in jobs in that field.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're screwed
Yeah.
if that becomes the standard. But ultimately, again, if you might have a job, I love my job, but I've been dealing with the climate, where the weather, which has been horrendous. So how do you sort of negotiate this without sort of, wilting in despair, or, how do we productively hit the streets? How do we productively get our students to think about their situatedness within not just a cultural and social context, but within an earth context? So when we talk about globalization, yes, but that's not just about equating students with different cultures and making sure that they get sort of training in second, third, fourth languages, but that they understand themselves as being part of a network. And this gets connected to this specious American individualism, which is just poisonous and pernicious, where we think of ourselves as being separate from, separate from everything that's around us. When we do not function, I can say I turn on the lights in this room. No, I flip the switch. It took a whole lot of other stuff to get the lights turned on in this room. The air is a temperature for, anyway, so enough. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Steve, I wonder if I could just address a very small piece of what Rhonda was just saying, that I think one way to grapple with some of these issues is to recognize that we're not really afraid in our profession of accountability. We want to have something to say about what we're accountable for. The right question is not how many of our students go into high-paying jobs the day they graduate. It's what real competencies did they develop while they were in our care and undergoing education at our hands. And I think there's lots of measures, including a sense of their place as a citizen, not just of the political world, but also of the ecological world, for which we could make very real cases that we are accomplishing true value-added education. But we have to make that case. We can't avoid accountability in all forms. We just have to pick what it is we'll demonstrate accountability for.
Rhonda, also, that was really important, what you had to say. This engaged learning that I've been talking about, the interdisciplinarity. On our campus, we do a global symposium every year that is every discipline involved. And this year we're doing Enemy of the People because of, with our Green Symposium that we're doing, we're using our productions to send a global message. And we do that every year, and we contextualize, and we do it within the framework of the entire university. And I think that's one way to educate our students.
Thank you, Brenda. A couple of things. One is the balancing act that we have to do to continue to have hope. Because if we don't have hope, we despair, and there's no point in doing anything. So, but also is, you know, there's right now, if you just watch the mainstream media, the hope drains out because it's so awful and so scary. And yes, I hate all these days of hot weather, and I'm only in Missouri, and it's been very nasty. But there are other things that I read and that I look at, and people that I talk to, who allow me to continue to have hope. And as I say, there are people who I know are working on it. I don't know if you know the book, The Cultural Creatives, talks about, you know, there are millions of people, and I'm sure a number of them in this room, who are working on various aspects of these issues. And I have to continue to have hope that we've got a chance.
Thank you, Suzanne. We have time for one more question. Unfortunately, but I know that there are several that you might want to ask, so.
Well, hopefully my question will be a good one to end on. First of all, I want to say this was such an important panel, but I encourage ATHE, I hope somebody's thinking about creating a volume of some of the most important information to publish, some of the most important information we've gotten at this 25th anniversary oriented conference. I thought it's just incredible. And I participated in the Leadership Institute, and I want to say I really feel that there's a moral imperative as well as other levels of urgency about why we have to think about leadership, not just in moving into the ranks of administration, but that we have to think about being leaders in every level that we're entering in the university. So I want to thank people for that. My name is Tiziana Lopez. I'm a faculty member at the University of California at Riverside in the theater department, and I've been on faculty in the UC system for nearly 20 years now. And I have to say, in the time that I've been there, there's only been 2 hires of Chicanos or Latinos or Latinos in the humanities, and we're a Hispanic serving research institution in the state of California, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for affirmative action programs. I was educated on the last wave, and in my state and in the UC system, we have research that shows the levels of hiring among minority faculty members have been stagnant since those programs ended. And so my question, and I really appreciate all of the data that was hired, because I think the rhetoric and the sentiment of a lot of affirmative action programming was, it's so familiar in what people are saying, but I think there was a rhetoric attached to it that didn't have the imperative of how important it was to future building. And so my question is, and I appreciate, Mark, you're talking about the meetings for presidents, because we also know change does not permeate the institution unless it happens from top down at every level possible. So my question is, how do we create a climate that permeates from the top down? I think we're being charged to think about the role we can play in fostering that climate, but how do we really begin to create institutional change to increase the numbers of faculty administrative representation and wrapping their thinking about these the quandary we need to work through, but also with the students, right, and beginning to create what David Gould calls the big shift on all possible levels. So that's a lot, I'm sure, but I wanted to offer that.
The advancement of traditionally underrepresented faculty in leadership of higher education institutions is one of the top priorities at ACE. And they have an office that works specifically to do mentoring and professional development for folks that have some interest in moving in that direction. I think the best way for us to help advance that agenda is similar to what Bobby and I are trying to do with the Leadership Institute, need to identify promising students and encourage them and imagine to see a future and the possibility and opportunity to advance to the most senior leadership positions in higher education. Because boards of directors and regents are looking for those individuals, and the key is to get people into the pipeline. So, you know, where you're at, Tiffany, at your point in your career with 20 years in higher education, I'd be in the ACE Fellows Program, and I'd be moving that agenda forward for your own development, and encouraging people that are in theater, that are from traditionally underrepresented groups, to think about that opportunity. There is nothing in the way of advancing in that direction except our tendency to think that we can't do it. Because we're told by people in the sciences or those people in other fields that are in the hierarchy of academic higher education that we don't have the capacity how we possibly can. And we do. In fact, we actually, those of us that get in these positions do quite well. Because we do understand what it takes to bring an ensemble of people together around the vision and move things forward toward a future. So I would encourage, the programs are there and looking for people. And that's how you make the change, is that more and more people that are sitting at this table don't look like we look, and have to come from different backgrounds and bring different perspectives, and that is highly valuable. And unfortunately, the quickest way in is in community colleges. And the greatest need are at our research institutions. And so I just encourage those of you in research institutions to think about that as an opportunity.
Can I just say one thing? And that is that we can, as ATHE, do something about it. We can look at how we do our programming at conferences. And we can look at, do we value diversity? If we value diversity, where are we placing sessions that are critical to what we do as faculty members and as departments in higher education and theater departments? Yesterday morning at 8 a.m., opposite a lot of sessions, there was an incredible session that the Latino group did on the pedagogies of teaching students of color, particularly Latinas and Latinos. And that session had some of the most critical and important people in the session presenting at 8 a.m. in the morning. And to me, I can look at conferences back, San Francisco, when we had 4 sessions at a time for some sessions during the conference, so that important issues could be seen by more people. And that's the kind of session that we need to have at the ATHE conference, in not necessarily a plenary, but in a place where there are fewer sessions at one time. Because what happens is, you've got 20-something programs, and then you're talking to yourselves in these sessions. And talking to yourselves is not why we're here. So I think that we have to go back to the table on the conference committees, and we've got to look at what we're doing in terms of structure, and what are our goals as an association, and how are they becoming evident in the conference itself.
And I want to add, thank you so much, Donna, for adding that. I want to acknowledge one of the things that the Leadership Institute did was it paired us with mentors, and I was so blessed to be here with Donna, because immediately after this conference we've been having such an important transformative conversation. So I want to acknowledge too that I think part of the transformation of the programming is thinking about not just these panels, but how can we create mentoring environments to be able to create the change, the action change. So I wanted to add that and thank everyone so much for this session.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd also like to echo my thanks to all the previous presidents who have blessed us this morning. And thank you so much for being here and for what you brought.